In a world gone mad, only rationality and common sense can save it. It's Andrew and Jerry Save the World with your hosts, Andrew Langer and Jerry Rogers. And now, here's Andrew and Jerry.
Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Andrew and Jerry Save the World. Episode 40, Andrew and Jerry Save the GOP, which I think all of us are in agreement. It definitely needs saving. I am Andrew Langer.
Jerry Rogers.
Who is a little under the weather. Jerry's a little logy today.
I am.
Burning the candle at both ends, my friend.
It's funny you say that. I thought about that today where I really don't feel well. And usually if I'm not feeling well, it lasts a day or two, whatever. Yeah. But this has stuck with me now for a while.
It's going around, my friend. I'm telling you. Yeah. We were talking about this yesterday as you were trying to figure out what you were going to do in terms of the radio.
Yeah.
I told you I've got family members who've gone through this. We've got friends who've gone through this. There is some stuff going around. And it's anyway, it can stay with you. So, I'm glad you're home. I'm glad you're there. I myself, Jerry, am nursing a really nasty bout of tendonitis in my Achilles tendon. So I'm hobbling around like someone who's hobbled, and that's not fun. And I gotta get it all cleared up by tomorrow, because we're driving to New York tomorrow, and it tends to exacerbate it driving.
What is the injury?
Well, it's tendonitis in my Achilles tendon. So if you're in traffic and you're sort of moving your foot and stopping and starting and you're rotating it, basically what happened is I wore. God, we really need to go down this rabbit hole. I have a pair of dress shoes. This sounds like a problem. Anyway,
you were injured by your dress shoes?
I was injured by driving in a pair of dress shoes that I shouldn't have been driving.
Oh my goodness.
A pair of wingtips that I should have been driving in. And then I exacerbated it by driving, spending 5 hours driving on Sunday. So
I busted up my ankle playing football and wore a soft cast and played in my first playoff game years ago. And then most recently, before COVID, I broke my ankle in five different places, fractures, and still haven't gotten it fixed. I'm still hobbling around on it, but I go jogging every day.
Yes, you have your constitutional.
Well, actually, let's be honest. I go for these long walks, but I did run, of my 5 marathons, I did run 1 marathon without training whatsoever.
Well, you heard about this guy. It was like a 75-year-old grandfather who ran a marathon smoking the entire time, which I find hysterically funny. So anyway, now to revisit. Obviously, we've decided that, at least I've decided, that there's a real danger in doing shows on election night because we just don't know. Thankfully, we are now more than a week out from the election, the midterm elections of 2022. We have a much better understanding. I mean, let's sort of pull it out, Jerry, because if you don't have a scorecard, we'll make one for you. If you have a scorecard, follow along at home. So Republicans have taken control of the House by 1 vote.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, again, they won't call races until they're certified, but it's likely that they could have 219, 220, even 221.
All right, a slim majority. But my point is,
you know what? But that term "slim majority" is meant as a pejorative. And remember, I think it was 2000. The last time, 4 years ago, the last time that the Republicans had a majority, they had 221 votes.
Yes, but I mean, my point. I don't mean it as a pejorative. I'm just literally trying to say. So we got Republicans are going to take control of the House.
That's all that matters.
They're not going to take control of the Senate.
For our listeners, when it comes to the House, the only number that matters is 218.
Yes, but yes, and we'll get back to this. I just want to set the score.
Right.
Democrats have maintained control of the Senate. We have this runoff that's happening. What?
Democrats
maintain control of the Senate. And on Sunday, Donald J. Trump Sr. announced that he is running for president. So this is where we are right now in America. And it sets up this thesis because obviously, given the election results, again, yes, Jerry is correct. 218 is all that matters, and it's all that matters for a whole host of reasons, not the least of which is setting the agenda and pushing back on the Biden agenda, but also being able to put a stop to whatever Joe Biden would want to do in the last 2 years of his first term. All of those things are important. Nevertheless, there are some serious mistakes that can be made moving forward, not the least of which is, this question of Donald Trump and what Republicans need to do about Donald Trump. And so because of the discussions that Jerry and I have had over the last week, this is why we are having now this discussion, Andrew and Jerry Save the GOP, because we've been to this dance how many times, Jerry, where Republicans have snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. And they go out and what is it that Grover Norquist said? There's a stupid party and there's an evil party.
Yeah.
And Republicans tend to be the stupid party.
Yeah. Although I'd like to get just some context on this.
Yes,
and that is the real trouble with the midterms in terms of perception is that Republicans and their allies overpromised. If you look at what actually happened, it's exactly what the polls said would happen. So there really were no surprises. And even our election evening podcast, again, we were on right after the Republican sweep, massive victory in Florida.
Yeah.
And I also, for context, if you're scoring at home, Republicans win. This midterm wasn't a tsunami. Yes, it's out of step in terms of other midterm elections, but even there, not really. I mean, this idea that midterm elections, the party out of the White House is going to pick up 40, 50 seats. That is a 20th century issue that won't happen again. The country for now is evenly divided, and that's what we have. If Georgia flips to Republican, we have a 50-50 Senate, and we're going to have a 218, 217, 219, 216 evenly split Congress with Republicans in control. Again, if you had to control one chamber, the Senate or the House, it's the House. The House majority matters. In the Senate, it doesn't matter because of the filibuster.
Yes.
So
essentially,
because
of the filibuster, and also, the filibuster, and absolutely.
But here's the bottom line. If Republicans are smart, to your question, they can govern over the next 2 years with a kind of center-right coalition. Think of who's up in the Senate in the next election cycle. There are 10 potential pickups for the GOP. Again, I'm not going to overpromise.
Right.
But of those 10, you have 5. You have Arizona, you have West Virginia, you have Pennsylvania, you have Montana, and you have other states. So my point is that it's in the interests of both parties to govern center right. But let's see what happens.
Well, right, and to govern. All right, I think folks need to understand what we mean by center right. I think the point is that Republicans need to govern smartly. They need to behave smartly. They need to be much better at articulating what it is that they want to do, presenting the alternative. Yes,
I'm laughing at that.
Well, okay,
because they have their challenge there.
Yes, that's what this is. This is exactly it. But this is again why we are saving the GOP by explaining to them what they need to do. See, part of the problem was, and this is what Jerry and I have talked quite a bit about. And in the end, Jerry and I have spent we've spent a lot of time in politics, but we spent a lot of time on the public policy side of things. And I can't speak for Jerry on this. I know for me, the policy side of it to me is the more interesting and the more important, because that's what really matters in the end. Right. There's the gamesmanship of politics, getting people elected to office and holding on to their elected office. What they do there while they are in office is what matters. And if you don't articulate well what you are wanting to do and how that is going to benefit people, or what the other side is doing and how it's going to harm people and why your alternatives are better, you are not going to achieve victory on the electoral side of things.
And unfortunately, the Democrats are so much better at the politics,
right?
And again, just a simple example of this truth that our listeners will understand. President Joe Biden makes this announcement of the federal student loan bailout.
Right.
Everyone knows, including the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, Democrat Speaker of the House, outgoing Speaker of the House. Everyone knows that it's unconstitutional and illegal. It doesn't matter,
right?
Because it's good politics. And again,
it is, time out for a second. It is retail politics in the very real sense of retail, in that they are literally buying votes. Go ahead. Yes.
And again, right after the election, it was made plain by the courts that this dog, what is it? This dog won't hunt.
Yes.
But again, there's a certain kind of cynicism and obvious dishonesty there. The fact is that the Democrats, to win, they're already the party of handouts, the party of giving gifts out, patronage, right? The old Tammany Hall, right? And they're expert at it. Where the Republicans don't get it or miss the mark is their policies, if enacted, will actually be better than the handout.
Right.
Will be better than
right, because you get to keep more of your own money. You will make sure that the price of goods and services doesn't skyrocket.
Right.
It's the point that, it was one of those things where our good friends at the Competitive Enterprise Institute were always on the leading edge on, right? And where they were better at beating groups like Cato, because CEI was always about, okay, Cato and CEI would work on things like climate change, climate policy. And Cato would produce good work and good work on the policies, but CEI was always better about explaining, this is going to drive up the cost of energy for you. This is going to take away these kinds of cars from you or make the cars you want to drive more expensive. One of the most effective videos, as I recall, was a video that CEI put out where they showed somebody trying to ride a bicycle in the snow and underscoring that this is what the left wants from you. They want you in cities riding your bicycle in the snow to work, right? This is certainly the case in Baltimore.
And again, not meaning to jump a topic here, but here it seems that the plain truth of how rotten the economy is, and high inflation, high energy costs, high gas prices, the border crisis, wage decreases, these were self-evident. However, this is where the Trump factor impacted the midterm elections in a great way, and that is where there was a swing voter who had inflation as a top issue, but was concerned about the chaos, so to speak, of a Donald Trump. They came down on voting against Trump and keeping the status quo.
Yeah.
And that's, again, exit poll shows us that Donald Trump's negative impact on the midterms for Republicans is you could teach a master's program class on this at Harvard University. It wasn't just picking bad candidates. It was much deeper and more profound than that. And,
no, because
we'll get into this.
I think it's a good entree into this, Jerry, because Democrats are working overtime and the leftist media is working overtime. They worked overtime during the 2022 midterms, and they're working overtime now to keep Donald Trump on the ballot. Now, right, Donald Trump didn't appear on the ballot. And you're right, outside of candidates where Donald Trump picked, nevertheless, they made Donald Trump an issue. So, you get to, let's say, Virginia's 2nd congressional district. Actually, Virginia is a good example of this because you had 3 battleground districts. You had Virginia's 2nd, which was the Elaine Luria district. You have the Abby Spanberger district, the 7th, and you had the Jennifer Wexton district, the 10th. All 3 of them, and what was that? All 3 of them had
this.
Hold on. Let me just get to this though. And all 3 of them put Donald Trump on the ballot. And only one Republican was able to overcome this, and that was Jen Kiggins in the second. But sorry, go ahead, Jerry. You were going to say something.
No, but again, just to emphasize the point you're making, political pundits, the political watchers, remember the polling data was correct. If if a Democrat was up by 3, the race was being handicapped +2 Republican. You know, I mean, again, that varied, but even where like Fetterman, even where Fetterman led in 9 out of 10 polls, and the polling average was like 2-3%.
Everybody assumed that the undecideds were going to break overwhelmingly for the Republicans.
But here's the thing that actually happened, and it connects to your point about Virginia. No one considered the Trump factor.
Right.
No one. It wasn't a consideration. It was never a data point. And so in Virginia, the congressional district 2, 7, and 10, the agreement was those who follow politics all agreed that if Republicans flipped the 2nd district in Virginia, they would gain the majority in the House.
Yeah.
If they flipped the 7th district, it would be a red wave.
Yeah.
However, if they flipped the 10th, it would be a tsunami.
Yeah.
And what happened? They did not flip the 10th or the 7th, but indeed the 2nd.
Yeah.
And again, but that's the Trump factor. The one issue that was not considered leading into election day was the massive negative impact by Donald Trump.
Right. And so when it gets into now why they are working overtime to resurrect him, and you have to look askance. Well, actually, we'll get to the looking askance at anybody on the right who is promoting Donald Trump and why that they're doing that. But I find it incredibly fascinating, as well as incredibly disturbing, that we're now getting reports out of the DOJ that they're finally admitting that there was nothing in the documents at Mar-a-Lago that they raided. Right,
or the Rudy Giuliani non-indictment,
the Rudy Giuliani non-indictment, all of which coming out after the election, right? And then you had folks who are turning around and sort of pushing this idea of Donald Trump becoming the nominee. And Jerry, you had this theory, and I think it's a good opportunity to open this up. So talk about this.
Well, I think once the dust settles, and it's still settling. We just had leadership elections in the House this week. The House was just declared for the Republicans. We still have the Georgia runoff in December, but once everything clears, you're going to see the media, you're going to see the Democrats, and you're going to see the Never Trumpers. You're going to see them all try to prop up Donald Trump in myriad ways, and the reason for that is simple, right? The Democrats need Trump to win.
Right.
The media need Trump for ratings, and the Never Trumpers, the grifters, they need Donald Trump to earn a living.
Right. And it gets down to a couple of different things. They know that the more that they can prop Donald Trump now, the more oxygen they can suck out of the legitimate debate, right? The more we are talking about Donald Trump, someone said it online, and it was a brilliant comment to make. The more we're talking about Donald Trump, the more Republicans are losing. We're talking about Joe Biden, the more Democrats are losing. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jerry.
Let me say this. And what I mean by propping up, I don't mean praising him
or
giving him credit. Just keeping him relevant in the race, baiting him and baiting his supporters. Let me give you an example. There is a political operative, infamous, famous, depending upon if he ever ran a candidate against you or not. His name's Rick Shafton, and Jersey guy, New York, from the Bronx, hardcore, roll your sleeves up. When he gets into the trenches with you, his candidates really go for the jugular.
Yeah.
He was also a massive pro-Trump early adopter, right? Trump speaks his mind. He pushes back on the establishment. He all the things that you wanted to be uncovered by the establishment, Trump was doing. He loved this guy. Well, he recently posted something, and to me, it was stunning. He said that the Democrats, the media, the Never Trumpers baited him the entire campaign. They baited Trump. They baited him, and he took the bait.
Yeah.
Where he went out and did the rallies, taking focus off candidates onto himself. But then even the announcement, his announcement at Mar-a-Lago on the 15th, that also, he was baited into doing that.
Right.
They started. So one way to prop up Trump is to give praise to DeSantis.
Right.
Right. Because that baits Trump to come in and do what? Criticize, Also, it baited him to make an early announcement. This is all, and again, for all those who think Trump plays this kind of third dimensional chess, he's being played right now,
Right.
and to the detriment of the 2024 elections and the GOP.
I want to be really clear about something, because I think that, people change over time and circumstances change over time. This is not 2016, certainly not 2015, but it's not 2016. And Trump is not who he was in 2016.
No.
Donald Trump had not been president. He had not spent, at that point, he had not had 5 years of relentless attacks going at them. And I'll tell you something, 5 years of being attacked on an hourly, a minute by minute basis, overwhelmingly, 95% of the stories in the mainstream press were anti-Trump and anti-Trump administration.
Oh yeah.
That's going to take a toll on somebody, especially if that person is a narcissist. Again, I don't want to engage in an armchair diagnosis.
Right. And also, you and I, Andrew, we're not anti-Trump. Donald Trump's policies were good policies. Donald Trump's presidency was much better than Joe Biden's. Donald Trump did keep his promises. He moved the embassy,
and more to the point, and also he taught other conservative Republicans how things could be done. If you just stick to your guns and you do fight, you can engage and you can have major policy success. You just have to be willing to fight for those things. But my point is this, is that, just because we first were Trump agnostics, or Jerry was an anti-Trumper and I was more agnostic, and then we became Trump supporters, does not mean that we are sort of that we are missing the greater game now, that Trump is going to somehow turn around and surprise us once again in the same way that he surprised us in 2016.
Right.
And we now see this, given what has happened in the 2 years since almost 2 years since Donald Trump left office, and most certainly what happened in 2022 with the elections and the exit polling. Data matters in all of this.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
And again, Donald Trump, I watched his Mar-a-Lago announcement.
As did I.
He hit all the right political themes in terms of pushing back on issues that are related to religious liberty, and to the pro-life issue, and to cultural issues, and to wokeism, and to the economy, and to China, and to manufacturing. He hit all the right issues. He's right on the issues. His problem is that as he's doing that, he lies. He tells untruths. And look, I always thought he got a bad rap here because he would exaggerate.
Sure.
He'd be called a liar. Then Joe Biden would lie, and the lie would be explained.
Yeah, they call he tells stories. Right. Joe Biden.
But the bottom line is what really offended me was, and again, maybe I shouldn't be offended because it's who he is, that he had no self-awareness. He made the case that his endorsed candidates actually were winners, and that the vast majority, 80% or whatever number he used, won re-election. In fact, he took credit. Again, I almost threw up a little bit in my mouth. He took credit for the House majority. But the problem is that that's all not true.
Yeah.
It's demonstrably not true. And in fact, it's the very opposite that's true. Donald Trump cost Republicans the Senate. He cost Republicans a greater majority in the House. He cost Republicans the governorships. Listen, Charlie Baker, like him or not, liberal Republican governor of Massachusetts, could have run for another term. Trump threatened to go after him with a pro-Trump candidate in the primary. And so Charlie Baker said, the heck with this, I'm not going to run.
Yeah.
What happened? Democrats pick up the seat. Same is true all over the country. Look at what happened in Pennsylvania. The sitting senator, Republican, Pat Toomey, wildly popular, very good senator, young man. Again, Trump came in and said, I'm going to run someone against you. Toomey said, well, the heck with that.
Yeah.
So he retires. And what happens? Then a Trump candidate wins, Oz, who was from New Jersey, who's pro-choice, who was a carpetbagger. And we wonder why the stroke damaged Fetterman lost. That's, again, the Pennsylvania race should be the this is what Trump did.
Yes.
A damaged candidate, John Fetterman, no business being elected to the Senate,
Right.
was elected because the Pennsylvania electorate decided we can't deal with the Trump nonsense. We're going to vote. We're going to vote for the guy who had the stroke. That should right there. That should tell Trumpers.
I want to talk about that issue, about the issue of fatigue, because that is also a huge issue here.
Absolutely.
I mean, when we talk about this, the issue of discussing politics and discussing ideas, I'm not operating under any illusions that a DeSantis or a Kristi Noem or a Nikki Haley is not going to be savaged by the press in the same way that Donald Trump is. I don't think they come with the same liabilities that Donald Trump does.
But they're going to go after them. And again, just like they called McCain unsuited for the presidency, they called Romney a murderer. They're going to do the same thing with whomever is the GOP nominee.
But the difference is that there are all of these other ancillary questions that suck all the oxygen out of the room, right? We can have a debate, at least if, let's say, a Kristi Noem is the nominee, and I don't think Kristi Noem is going to be the nominee, but let's say that Kristi Noem is the nominee. We're going to have a debate on her record. We're going to have a debate on her policies, and that's important. With a Donald Trump presidential campaign in 2024, it's when is he going to be indicted? Should a twice impeached president should a twice impeached president be able to run? We're going to have the legal question as to whether or not Donald Trump engaged in an insurrection and whether or not his campaign itself is violative of the Constitution. All of these questions about the legitimacy of the candidacy itself are gonna suck all of the oxygen out of the room. And hold on for a second, because I want to talk about my fatigue. I don't want to have that debate going into 2024. I want to have a debate over inflation. I want to have a debate over the Green New Deal. I want to have a debate over what an America with a $7 trillion regulatory cost on an annual basis looks like. That's the discussion I want to have, not about these other things. And call me provincial, call me a rhino, call me whatever, but I'm sorry, talking about substantive conservative issues is what saves the Republican Party. Go ahead, Jerry. I'm sorry.
Well, again, if you're 100% right. If Trump wins the nomination, the bottom line is, and this is what Trump supporters will say, and again, we're Trump supporters. We just don't think he should run again. But those who are sticking with him this time, the grifters, and unfortunately, I say this, there is this kind of cult of Trump. The cultists and the grifters are going to want him to run regardless. But they'll say rightly, they will say this, and they'll be correct, that it's unfair. The impeachments were out of order. They were not legit, and they're right about that.
Yeah, sure.
And the Mar-a-Lago raid was not legit, and they're right about that. And a lot of the civil suits and other legal questions the former president is facing are not legit, and they're right about all of it. But here's where they're wrong, though. I think Trump himself, just in terms of being a Republican voter, conservative, he disqualifies himself in two areas. Where, regardless of the fatigue, you're right. Regardless of that, he's a drag on elections. The reason why he disqualifies himself is twofold. Number one, the lockdowns. Donald Trump caved on the COVID lockdowns, and you and I talked about this. I talked about it on my radio show. That he had no real power to reopen the country.
Yeah,
but he did have the purse strings. He could have used the federal budget. He could have used public health monies. He could have used the persuasion of the White House to force governors to reopen the economy. He not only did not do that, but he caved to Fauci and Birx. And that's a big issue that hasn't been discussed yet. If I'm DeSantis, I'm focusing on the Trump lockdowns. The second thing, and I'm going to throw something at you.
All right.
I'm going to make your head spin, Andrew. The second thing is, there was no insurrection on January 6th. The Democrats, unfortunately, made this into a partisan affair. So we never really got to the bottom of what happened, what the president knew and didn't know, and all the rest of it. I wish there was a more comprehensive bipartisan investigation. It didn't happen because the Democrats play politics. But here's the thing we know is true. And we know it's true because Mike Pence has gone public. He had this, and I read it, this chilling op-ed in the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah.
And that is that Donald Trump was asking his vice president to do something that was untethered from the law, untethered from the Constitution. The president was asking the vice president to do something the vice president had no authority to do. And that, to me, disqualifies Donald Trump from running again. What Donald Trump should have done, I'll say this and I'll give you the word. Donald Trump should have, it was a raw deal. Yes, the election was rigged, 2020. We've gone through this.
Yes.
It wasn't rigged in the way that Donald Trump and the grifters said it was rigged. It was rigged in a much more deeper, profound, comprehensive way, but that's neither here nor there for this. But what he should have done was, you know what? I got screwed. I got screwed by big media, by big corporations, by the establishment. But you know what? The democracy, the republic matters more. I concede the race. I'm going to work with Joe Biden to make sure the transition is smooth. But guess what? I'm coming back and I'm going to get you.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't be having this discussion about Trump today if he had done that.
You know, it's interesting. Because listen, I can talk about, you know, my theories about Donald Trump's mental state on January 6th and sort of a break from reality. But let's set that aside, because we've talked about the issue of ex-presidents and Donald Trump being lacking in being a good ex-president, part of it, right? If Donald Trump wanted to run again, now he did some things right. He's done some things right. The creation of the America First Policy Institute, that's a step in the right direction, right? You create.
Yes, but he didn't do that though.
What do you mean he didn't do that? That's
not his group. I mean, he didn't found it. He's not there. He's not leading it.
Well,
he's and you know, my understanding is that it's those who are present, you know, and you know who they are. It's his old economic advisors and the rest who are doing it.
Yes, but I've been under the impression that this is sort of the extension of, this is the policy brain trust in waiting, you know, from the former administration. And again, I
agree with that, but it seems to me to be a brain trust disconnected from the body.
Well, but they may be doing that on purpose as a way of, anyway, set that aside for a second. Okay. My point is, so you create the brain trust and you create sort of, you know, the alternative vision in a way that is more connected to the Make America Great. What is it? MAGA now? It's Make America Great Again, whatever it is. But you know, but then the other part of this is they should have taken the steps to create the entity that was going to go and fix all of these election rules that cost Donald Trump the election back in 2020, and would have worked overtime to safeguard the deficiencies in the electoral process. Right? Donald Trump gets up there and he says on Monday night, was it Monday? It was Tuesday night. I'm running, and when I'm president, I'm going to declare all of these things that the president can't declare in terms of election law. But you know, where were you? What were you doing? What were your people doing over the last 2 years besides being sued by, or besides offering up advice to lackluster candidates for governor in Pennsylvania? You know, what were you doing to actually fix these problems that went down the road? I'm sorry, Jared, go ahead.
While Ron DeSantis was literally recreating the political map in Florida.
Right.
What was Donald Trump doing in terms of early balloting, in terms of a network around the country? The bottom line, he sat on $100 million. We know that the candidates he endorsed were outspent, outraised 10, 15, 20-fold.
Yeah.
You had some races where Hassan had, you know, tens of millions of dollars, and the Trump candidate in Vermont, in New Hampshire, Bullock, had 2 million.
Right.
Well, you can't compete 50 million versus 2 million. But where was Donald Trump?
And also the other part of it, right? And maybe spend some of this, right? $100 million spent on a national campaign to work those voter laws, to file lawsuits to challenge those voter laws. All of that could have been spent in substantive work, but instead it's spent on creating, I guess, a war chest going into 2024.
Trump, during the campaign, when we were fighting for a majority in the Senate, his candidates came to him and asked him for help.
Yeah.
And what he did was, well, I'll let you rent my list. And for every dollar that you raise, this is true. I'm going to give you, for every dollar that you raise, 99 cents goes to me, Donald Trump, and 1 penny goes to your campaign.
Listen, this
is not a serious, Donald Trump, God bless him. He's not a serious person, or not the serious person that we need for 2000.
Listen, all I know is my favorite little gem of the last week was when he took a big crap on Glenn Youngkin. And he said, "Hey, Glenn Youngkin, you owe me because I did a rally where I appeared by telephone for you."
It's crazy.
It's like, the only thing that sort of less impactful Donald Trump could have said was, "You did a rally and I sent you good vibes. I sat there and I meditated in my chair and I said, oh, yeah, Glenn Youngkin, I'm going to send you good vibes." That was the only step beneath, hey, I'm going to call you by telephone while you're running.
But there are some good signs, right? I mean, you had a number of potential candidates for 2024 come out and say that Donald Trump shouldn't run. You had his former defense secretary came out yesterday. Espen, is it Espen? Esper, sorry.
Yeah, Mark Esper.
Come out and say that Donald Trump is not fit for office.
See, okay, all right. I want to just say this much. I think the rhetoric saying that Donald Trump is unfit for office, I think that plays into Donald Trump.
It does.
I think that spurs.
But for the first time, though, when they said this before, I'm not sure I'm not sure how serious it was. But listen, we can't underscore this. Donald Trump wanted his vice president, Mike Pence, to create a constitutional crisis. How can any man or woman serve as president, and they're willing to throw the Constitution under the bus because they felt wronged?
But again, so I come back to, I don't know. That to me seems to indicate a questionable mental state. But I don't want to get away from this other part of it, because I don't want to lose the thread here.
Okay.
Because we are starting to go down the thread of what needs to be done to change the landscape, and to have a landscape in which Donald Trump goes off, not quietly into the sunset, but just sort of, it's the old phrase, "Don't go away mad, just go away." But the point is, we are starting to see this, because Jerry and I have had this conversation. What do we do? And Jerry, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but Jerry said, well, we need responsible adults in leadership to go and tell Donald Trump he can't run.
Yeah.
The problem is Donald Trump won't listen to those people.
Well, I have another idea.
And I have another idea too. And we're already starting to see this. Let me start here, because we've talked about the issue of talk radio and the rank and file. It's going to take the people that the rank and file Republicans and the Trumpers listen to. It's going to take those people voicing this alarm. And it's going to be a painful process. We're already seeing it. I had a conversation with a talk radio host the other day who said, something, I came out and I dared suggest that it would be a bad idea for Donald Trump to not run in 2024. And about half my audience was angry about this and angry at me about this. That's going to happen.
Listen,
it's going to happen.
I've hosted 2 shows at WBAL since the election, and I've taken a similar point of view that we're discussing today. And overwhelmingly, the Trump supporting audience agree with me.
Yeah. Again, that's good to know.
It's anecdotal, but
yes, and then the plural of anecdotes is not data. But the point, but as I'm saying, so I've got this conversation, and it's just gonna take time. The other thing, and we are starting to see this, and this is the more important thing, Jerry. It's the money issue. We have had 2 billionaire Republican donors say they will not support Donald Trump going into 2024.
Yeah, and Donald Trump won't spend his own money.
And the only earned media he's going to get is not going to be helpful to him.
No, listen.
Sorry, go ahead.
I have two other ideas.
Please,
Again,
good.
I'm gonna get ready to have your mind.
Remember,
blown.
the thesis of the show is Andrew and Jerry save the GOP. So go ahead.
Listen. So, if the GOP is serious about moving past Donald Trump, then why not introduce ranked voting in the primaries?
Oh, I am not a.
Wait, let's
coming back once again.
Let's take 5 minutes. Let's
not
take
a
5
fan
minutes.
of ranked
But
choice voting.
I'm not a fan either, at all. But in the primary, in this year, in the primary leading to 2024, ranked voting will get rid of him.
It will get rid of him, but I don't think it will produce the strongest candidate.
Okay.
I think it would produce a right. I mean,
well, not really, right? I mean, if you're voting for Donald Trump, again, let's speculate. Let's have some fun. We don't usually do this. So let's say the field is Trump, Hogan, Nome, Haley, DeSantis, Cruz, and some others. If you're a Trump voter, your number two is who?
Is DeSantis. But my problem is, if you're DeSantis, you're
number two.
How about how many people? But here's the problem, Jerry. What happens if we do ranked choice voting and everybody has a candidate who's not Donald Trump as their first choice, but they pick Donald Trump as their second choice, and all of a sudden through ranked choice voting we get Donald Trump as the nominee?
I guess, but that's I mean, just doing the math in my head, back of the envelope.
Listen, I will say this much. I say this. The Republican primary last year had ranked choice voting, and my candidate lost. But then again, it comes down to
I'm sorry, in Virginia.
In Virginia, yes, yeah. So Glenn Youngkin, I say this. Glenn Youngkin got the nomination through ranked choice voting.
It worked out, didn't it?
And it worked out. I know, yes, and I that's why I was giving the caveat. And the caveat, of course,
again, ranked choice primaries for the presidential might be a way to move past Trump. The second way is to have Republicans who now have the gavel and committee oversight, House oversight, to do a legit investigation on what happened on January 6th. Not all this nonsense about trespassing and the shaman who's dressed in a weird outfit. But actually, shaman, yeah, right.
Shaman, yeah.
Shaman Sherman.
Yeah, shaman, yes.
Squeeze the Sherman, shaman, baby.
that's a Michael.
I like
Michael
saying
Jackson word.
Shaman.
Yes.
But have a real investigation that focuses on the day, January 6th, and what was or the days leading. Again, take the. I encourage our listeners, go and read the Mike Pence piece in the Wall Street Journal.
Yeah,
it's chilling what happened, and why not have a committee investigation, a House oversight investigation on what the president was pushing the vice president to do.
Yeah, that
alone, that could knock him out of the race.
Well, or it could, and it could knock Mike Pence out of the race as well. I mean, it's just
but this goes to our thesis of the program. January 6th wasn't about finding the truth. The committee, the
January 6th committee, yes.
January 6th committee was never about finding the truth. It was about baiting, about propping up, about pushing Donald Trump on the electorate. Brilliant. Yeah. Democrats are brilliant.
Yes. Keeping it revived. And we thought in the end that folks would be, and rightly so, right? That folks would be much more concerned about
the irony is, again, if you look at
anything else.
One day it'd be fun just to go through all the data. So Democrats had hoped that Republicans would be viewed by swing voters as a threat to democracy.
Yeah.
That never happened. But those swing voters in many instances still voted for the Democrat. And it didn't have anything to do with with threat to democracy, but rather it had to do with, Andrew, what you just said earlier in the
Chaos,
program.
the fatigue, the Trump fatigue.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah, they're just
Exactly
they're tired.
right.
They're tired of it.
Just tired of it.
It is a whole din, and you get wrapped up in this. And we are. I'm sure a lot of you are like this as well. You spend a lot of time watching the news or reading the news or listening to the news, and sometimes you just get tired and overwhelmed by this. You also get sort of sucked into the death spiral, and that's hard to break. I mean, it's funny, and it intrudes on every part of life. This is the other aspect of it. And there are folks who just want to pull away. They want havens. I'll give you this example. I think I've talked about this in the past. Jerry and I were both huge fans growing up of a radio station in New York called WNEW. It's a great classic rock station. And there is a Facebook fan page where folks talk about rock music, or they talk about the station and the history of it, because it's no longer around. It's now, there's now another rock station in New York. But one of the admins of this rock page injects his politics into everything. And he's made it all about, Trump bashing. And folks are like, listen, this is not why we're here. We're here because we want to talk about music, or we want to talk about Pete Fornatel's Mixed Bag, on Saturdays, or Sundays, whenever it was or whatever it was.
Right.
We don't want this. And that's
how you would keep the station tuned to WNEW, and have, if you had a stereo like I had, my first stereo, you could record off the radio.
Oh yes.
And you'd have a cassette tape ready.
Yes.
So when one of your favorite songs come on, you could record the song.
Something, it's so funny you say that, because just, we're going to digress for a second, because I had this conversation with somebody, it may have been my wife. Walk Like an Egyptian by the Bangles came on. Now, this is not a song you would have heard on Z100. I'm sorry, it's not a song you would have heard on WNEW. You would have heard it on Z100, which was the pop station.
100.3.
And so by the same token, my wife was saying, oh, well, Walk Like an Egyptian came out, I think she said it was like 82, 83. I'm like, no, 86. Because I remember listening to it Thanksgiving of 86, on my Walkman with my family walking into the Museum of Natural History. I remember this vividly. And my point, Jerry, is I recorded it off of the radio. I had the cassette tape in there, Z100, hit record, and I got Z100. It's actually, to continue to digress for a second. Part of the reason why Jerry and I love radio, and why we love terrestrial radio, is because we were steeped in this, both the talk side, but also the music radio side.
It opened up the world to us.
And if you were
the
not,
world of ideas,
there is a real
culture
difference in terms of your talk radio styles. If you come out of, I don't know what kind of a
Andrew
music radio tradition. Yes, go ahead.
Andrew. I remember in 1977, I was a kid, Liam's age. And my father and I, because we didn't have cable and there wasn't cable options, and we didn't go out to the bar to watch it, but we would listen to Muhammad Ali fights on the radio.
Sure.
On the radio.
Yes.
Like we listened to baseball on the radio. We listened the songs that we loved. My first time ever hearing Elvis Presley was on WHN.
I will tell you,
New York City.
I remember being in the
WHN.
I remember WHN, of course.
It was the country western station in New York.
So
AM, by the way, AM.
Well, listen, WABC, a lot of folks was a music station on the AM dial. I will never forget. It's maybe the first time I ever really asked something of a friend's parent. I was in the car with a friend's mom, my friend and his mom. I don't remember where we were driving, but she was, running through the dial, right? That you had an actual dial that you would turn. And Baba O'Reilly by The Who came on.
Yeah.
That synthesizer introduction. And she went past. I'm like, wait. I heard it.
That?
And I'm like, hey, can you please go back? And she went back. I remember it vividly. That whole thing. The power of radio, as we talk about. Anyway,
let me ask you a question.
And then I want to shift gears for the
but let me ask you a serious question. So just 3 days ago, depending upon when folks are listening to this, earlier this week, Donald Trump announced his run for the presidency.
Yes.
What has he done since then? How unorthodox is this? Usually you announce and there is a media tour. There are interviews. There's a push to go out and do rallies or to meet and greet. He's doing none of this.
And what is he doing productively for this? See, this is the essence of Trump in the end, is that it was all about this. He went headlong into this announcement. People advised him to not do the announcement. We want to focus on Georgia.
I want to comment on that, if you don't mind. So there was a lot of talk leading up to this, a lot of media reporting. So it wasn't just political talk here in DC.
Yeah.
There was reporting that Donald Trump's closest advisors were pushing him to say that he would want Ron DeSantis as his running mate. And as I'm reading this, I'm shaking my head because, Andrew, what does the Constitution say about?
Oh, they have to be from two different states.
So again, I'm reading this report. And I'm like,
yes, and other people are saying, "Oh well, we'll get Ron DeSantis to change his residency to somewhere else."
But again, it shows.
No, you change your residency to somewhere else.
But who's listening?
Yeah,
who's he listening to? Who are these advisors?
By the way, thank you.
Telling him,
which is
another understanding of what's going on.
Another big difference between now and 2016 is he does not have the same team that was surrounding him then. A team of legitimate professionals who understood what you needed to do to become president. The people who are surrounding him now are people who have had abysmal track records, whether it was the 2020 election itself or the 2022 midterms and the candidates that they supported. So anyway, so that's part of this. Jerry, I want to shift gears because there are two other topics I want to talk about while we're talking today. I want to talk about this Marriage Act in the House. Because there's a lot of misinformation that's flying around out there about this.
And also what's bothersome about it is that it just appeared.
Yes.
Now, mind you, it's been in the works for so many months.
Well, a version of it passed the House in July, right? I mean,
right. Yeah.
But that in and of itself also suddenly appeared.
The Dobbs decision, Democrats were lying again about how interracial marriages were going to be threatened and other such things, and so they hastily approved the act in the House. Although what passed in the House is not what passed in the Senate.
Yes,
which I find very interesting. And what are they going to do about that? I have a great deal of concern about this, and the sad thing is that it doesn't matter because it's a done deal,
right?
And a done deal with no debate. No public debate, no public discussion. Were there even hearings?
Well, I don't know. I have no idea. But again, it gets into your whole issue of the return to regular order. I mean, so that it's so rapidly, markedly out of order there. But the issue really comes down to what the bill says. And there are a lot of folks who are out there saying, "Oh, there are specific carve-outs for nonprofits." But that's not the issue. There are two things that are at work here. Number one, the carve-outs for nonprofits are very shaky, because in essence,
but explain what that means. Like, how could there be? This is my problem with this. And you and I talked. I'm going to take one step backward, so we can take two steps forward on this conversation. For the record, I think that two individuals, opposite sex, same sex, if they want to organize their lives and live in a relationship, it should be legal. It should be offered dignity. It should be recognized. I have no problem with any of that. In fact,
I agree with you.
I was an early adopter to the idea of civil unions. My great concern here is the same concern I had in Maryland when Maryland passed so-called marriage equality. They had these exceptions, these religious liberty protections. And I said to you on your podcast at the time, you and Mark Nugent, I think, I said to you on your podcast, I said, look, I said, I'm not against this in principle. I'm against it in practicality and practice, because if you have to carve out a protection that is protecting my constitutional right to exercise religion, there's a problem with the legislation.
Right. It in and of itself, it admits that it's impinging on those rights, and that's part of my point here. Yes. But the issue in terms specifically about the nonprofits is you only hold, right? Remember, for again, a 501c3 charitable organization. Now, that is an organization that is engaged in what they call social welfare or charitable activity. It includes research and education and policy analysis, but it also includes churches, etc. You only hold your nonprofit status, and what that means is it's the ability of people to donate to you and you don't pay taxes, but also the ability of people to take a tax deductible make a contribution that's tax deductible. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here. It's important to say this.
But the bottom line, a little bit, and that is, if there's a Christian, Orthodox Christian nonprofit, and as part of participating, being hired by this nonprofit, you have to take, or you can't engage in certain activities that the nonprofit deems as immoral. So this nonprofit would not hire you if you're in a same-sex relationship.
And my point is that you can only, your nonprofit status, your status as a 501c3 organization is granted by the IRS, and you essentially have to certify that you're not engaging in activities that are contrary to U.S. federal law,
right?
And that therefore that status can be revoked. That's part of the danger here. The other part of it is that if you are, let's say, an adoption agency and you're a faith-based adoption agency, let's say you're not even a Christian. Let's say you were an Islamic faith-based adoption agency, and you don't want to allow a child to be adopted who's either A, not Muslim, or B, outside of traditional marriage. You can have your nonprofit status revoked according to this law. That is part and parcel of this.
Right.
The other part of this is, if I am someone who is in the for-profit world and I do not want to do something that acts against my conscience, this federal law seems to contradict that, because I'm not engaging in the nonprofit faith-based world. I'm engaging in a for-profit enterprise, and we have seen people prosecuted under this. I have a problem with that. Sorry, Jerry, go ahead.
I don't understand how this law is not a violation of the First Amendment. I just don't get it. And the fact that 12 Republicans, look, these 12 Republicans want to, I think, publicly put a governmental stamp of approval on same-sex unions. I get that. And there might be ways to do that, but this isn't it. This legislation, again, the fact
it is very simple. See, this is the thing that gets me, right? If you believe in gay marriage, and as Jerry and I both said, we both support the idea. Now, Jerry talks about civil unions. I believe, listen, if the state's going to be involved in the concept of marriage and performing weddings, then two people can go and get married. They can have a wedding by whomever, justice of the peace, or if they want to get a bond and have somebody else marry them, that's fine.
Sure, yeah.
The simplest, most straightforward federal legislation would be a reciprocity legislation, which is to say that a gay marriage in one state is legal in all 50 states and all territories of the United States.
Sure.
Right? That's the simplest and straightforward.
And frankly, the Congress has the authority to do that by the Commerce.
That's 100% absolutely true. That is absolutely true.
Just for clarity for our listeners, the text of the First Amendment, right? Congress shall not make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech, etc., or the press, etc.
Yep, got it.
This legislation, in my mind, is picking and choosing over a religious issue.
100%.
And that's why it's wrong. And it surprises me that 12 Republicans don't understand that.
And but again, right? I mean, this gets into the whole thing, right? Which is, you pick and choose which parts of the Constitution you want to follow.
Well, here's the bottom line.
But hold on.
It's going to pass.
Well, it's going to pass. And so here is again, the brilliance of the Democrats in all this. they recognize that in order for this to be challenged in court, you have to find the right fact set. Someone's going to have to be prosecuted under this. Someone is going to have their nonprofit status revoked over this.
Right.
It's going to have to be the right plaintiff picking the right counsel, and then it's going to have to wind its way through the courts, right? Because otherwise you could challenge us on First Amendment grounds, but if there's no action there's no case or controversy.
Someone has to have standing.
Someone has to have standing. There has to be, yes, it will be mooted because for a lack of standing.
Right.
If it does eventually make its way to the Supreme Court and the Supreme Court overturns it on First Amendment grounds, well, then it's the reactionary, what's the word I'm looking for? Not incompetent Supreme Court, illegitimate Supreme Court. It's an illegitimate Supreme Court run by, conservative reactionaries like Amy Coney Barrett and Brett Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, etc. And therefore, we need to expand the court. This is, we're going to use this as a cudgel at election time. This is the brilliance of the Democrats, is that this is yet another thing that they're looking well down the road at this. And the
irony here is that this is a layered, complex conversation. I mean, you and I, look, I'm a Christian. I believe that God intended men and women to marry once for life. That is what marriage is. Again, it's controversial. I don't like divorce. I will never engage in divorce because it's, in my mind, it's contrary to God's best. But it doesn't mean I want divorce to be illegal. I don't think men and women who aren't married should live together, but I don't think there should be a prohibition on it. I don't understand, or I do understand perhaps, why our gay friends can't understand, why they can't understand that I can be pro-gay. I could want you to have a wonderful, free life of dignity, and still opposed on moral grounds the idea of gay marriage.
But more to the point, no, let's take it a step further. You can be pro-gay marriage, and yet that our friends on the left don't understand the idea of, you don't want government to force someone to act beyond in contravention of their beliefs.
That's not my point, though. My point is,
I thought that was your point.
No, my point is that I'm against divorce. If my outside of the adultery or abuse, I don't think people should get divorced, period. I think it's immoral. I think divorcing your wife over anything outside of adultery or abuse is immoral. However, if I was a legislator, I would never vote to make divorce illegal. If my daughter or one of my daughters came to me and said they're going to live with their boyfriend, I would say, no, you're not. And if you insist on doing it, I'm going to take your boyfriend to a river and cut him up and dump him, and no one will ever see him again. Because I think living together outside of marriage, I think sex outside of marriage is immoral. But I wouldn't criminalize it. So the same thing. I think same sex. I think
you wouldn't criminalize it for everybody else. You'd criminalize it for the guy your daughter was going to live with.
Yes.
Because he would face the ultimate criminal penalty. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jerry. Just want to make sure we're understanding
the same thing here is that I believe that same-sex relationships are immoral, period. I mean, it's contrary to what is in the scriptures. It's contrary to God's best, and I think it's immoral. It doesn't mean that I would want it politically to be made illegal.
All right, I want to shift gears one more time, Jerry, and I want to talk about something. You gave me a phone call on Tuesday afternoon, and you said, I can't believe this story. I'm not going to give the full context. You'd come off the air on Tuesday afternoon. You said, I can't believe the story of the missiles hitting Poland and what's going to happen. And I walked you through what was going to happen. And it's important because as everybody was going off half cocked about this, everybody, yeah, well, it's World War III, NATO was attacked, one's attacked, all must respond. And what did I say to you then? Do you remember?
So I'm having
that's all right. You're right.
Health issue. Yeah.
That's all right. You're doing better.
Well, you said,
go ahead.
You said that there would have to be council and meetings and folks determining what happened and all the rest of it.
This is not Pearl Harbor. you know, and even with Pearl Harbor, there was not an immediate retaliation against the Japanese, right? That we declared war the day after, but we were attacked. So I want to just caution all of you. There is a reason why precepts exist and why we believe in a deliberative process on things. You never make policy in a crisis. Never make policy in a crisis. I've said this before. I will say it again. I said to Jerry, here's what's going to happen. Poland is, if first of all, if we continue to believe that the missiles came from Russia, Poland is going to demand some kind of response from Russia. If Poland believes that it was attacked or that this was, you know, Russia and that its sovereignty was violated, they're going to call for the North Atlantic Council to meet. This is sort of the governing body of NATO.
Article 4.
Yes. And the governing body of NATO, the North Atlantic Council, will do some kind of an investigation. And
Article
they will
4
determine.
is the consultation.
Yes. And they will determine whether or not this was an attack, where the attack came from, and what the response of NATO ought to be. There are many steps that need to happen before all of a sudden we embark on World War III. Now, there are
although the media,
the
media has lost all interest in this story.
Well, yeah, of course they lost all interest in it once the Biden administration. I don't know if Joe Biden meant to say this out loud, but once Joe Biden said out loud, yeah, we think the missiles are actually Ukrainian and not Russian. This is, you know, I will say this. I am deeply concerned right now about the twin stories, and they are twin stories of the missile attack or the missiles falling, the Ukrainian missiles, and the FTX story. Which I don't think we need to really get into, but the relationship between this FTX crypto exchange and Ukraine and the allegations of money laundering. You know, you and I had conversations, good Lord, Jerry, 7 months ago now, 8 months ago, back when the war was starting, and I was concerned about misinformation, and I thought we'd finally gotten a handle on things. But I'm concerned that as we hasten towards the preparations for winter in Central Europe, people are going to do stupid things, and we're going to lose sight of the fact that Ukraine can actually push Russia out of this, out of their territory if they remain resolved.
The funny thing about this topic is that you really have this kind of debate. Don't believe everything you hear about Ukraine versus, you know, Russia, Putin, evil. The bottom line to me, right, is that the Biden administration, they laid the pathway for Putin to invade,
right,
for over a year. Number one. Number two.
Well, yeah, for 8 years, if you think about it, you know, going back to 2014 and the Obama administration.
Number two, the sanctions haven't been severe enough, and the military aid, hasn't been great enough. And, you know, maybe the Ukraine could have pushed Russia out by now if the West had actually supplied them with the weapons needed, and we haven't done it.
I think, you know, it's interesting because there are a lot of things that happen. We've had Paul Post on, we've had on Tony Schaefer to talk about these things. There was it's much in the same way that there were greater expectations for the GOP in 2022. There were greater expectations once Russia invaded that this would all be over and done with by Russia. Right. But for Russian incompetence and the US's, help from allies of Ukraine to keep Russia out and to frustrate their efforts.
But it's as if the Ukraine allies, what they're doing is, it's like that Star Trek episode where they're giving them just enough aid so they can keep a stalemate.
Yeah,
remember that episode where
balance of Balance of Terror.
Yeah, so the entity that was giving the
Organians,
the Klingons, the Klingons. Oh yeah.
The entity was the Organians. They were giving the Klingons and the people on that one planet with the blonde people, right? It was the blonde people.
No. What I'm talking about, this is interesting. What I'm talking about is the episode where for some reason the Enterprise had picked up a contingency of Klingons, and there was an entity that fed off of violence, And so that entity trapped the vast majority of the Enterprise crew, trapped them, and so the numbers were evened.
Sure.
And the weapons were evened. And so they fought each other at a stalemate.
Yeah, I still think it was okay. I'm conflating two episodes. I still think it was anyway. It doesn't matter.
Whatever, yeah.
We're sort of down this road.
But that's American policy, it seems to me, with Ukraine. We're aiding them just enough to keep a stalemate.
Right, because and I think part of it at the beginning was that there was never any expectation that the Ukrainians, I'm not saying the Ukraine, but that Ukrainians were going to be able to push them back the way that they did. Now that we've demonstrated what they can do, it is more than ever incumbent upon us to work hard to make sure. Again,
but I would say this, because you hear lots of, we're not going to give more aid to Ukraine. Shit or get off the pot.
Right.
Either fund these people so they can win, drive the Russians out, or stop.
Well, and that's
one or the other.
And that's just it. It's at a point where we now really understand that we can achieve a victory for Ukraine without causing World War III to ignite, as long as we continue to push the effort. And you're right, giving them the weapons that they need is the way to do it.
And again, this is Monday morning quarterbacking, but this idea that Russia in any way would even be a match versus the West and the United States in a World War III, in retrospect, is ridiculous.
Well, I mean, the real question is what would a caged rat do, right?
Even if they dropped a tactical nuclear weapon, Russia would be defeated in weeks. The real geopolitical threat to America and a World War III potential is Taiwan, a fight over Taiwan and China.
Which allow me, Jerry, to then point out this week's episode of the Lunch Hour podcast with the Federal Newswire. I interview Stephen Yates from the America First Policy Institute, who is director of their China policy program. We talk about that very issue. Yeah. You can find that. We have links to that up at the Andrew and Jerry Save the World page.
It just shows you how incompetent the Biden administration is.
Well, feckless, I think, is really, yeah. I love that word in all of this.
Yeah.
Certainly showing up wearing a Chairman Mao jacket to the G20 summit and essentially engaging
and congratulated Xi Jinping, his election to be president.
Right. Yes. Well, from
hey, congratulations.
One fake elector to the other. Jerry, I know you're sick. When are you? You're back on Sunday, and you're doing Wednesdays now.
Yeah. So
for the most part,
on WBAL, you can catch the Jerry Rogers Show Sundays 7 a.m. to 10, Sunday mornings, and Wednesdays 10 to 2. No.
Yes.
Yes.
No Wednesdays. No Wednesdays. Oh, are you doing daytime? It's all confusing now. You were going to do nights on Wednesdays.
Yeah,
from 8 to 11.
I'm going to be on Wednesdays. Stay tuned if it's going to be the morning or the nighttime. But Wednesdays and Sundays on WBAL.
The Lunch Hour podcast will be continuing through the beginning of 2023. So please stay tuned for all of those. Oh, by the way, I will say this much, and again, listenership has been great. Please leave us a rating. Tell your friends, tell your family members, tell your family members' friends, tell your friends' family members.
Tell somebody.
Tell
somebody.
Superliminal advertising, word of mouth. To listen to Andrew and Jerry Save the World. Jerry, what do you want folks to do?
Find the truth, plant your feet, and stand firm. God bless you.
Have a great week, everybody. Have fun. Actually, Jerry, I'm sorry. I mean, we're gonna have to do an episode before Thanksgiving, aren't we?
We'll do a special. What are the things Andrew and Jerry are thankful for?
Andrew and Jerry are thankful. I think that's good. So tune in next week for that.
We are thankful. We're very blessed.
Have a great week, everybody. Have fun, and please stay safe.